All right, so I'm going to assume that all of you were in my earlier presentation. If you were not, I have a card, actually anybody could use it, that has a link to the first chapter of Eat What You Love that will give you the foundation. But for all of you that were there, we're just going to pick right up where, of course, at the mindful eating cycle. So my intention for the very short 45 minutes that we have together is to show you how we can use each of these steps to start to become more aware of mindless and emotional eating and habits that aren't serving us very well. We're only going to be able to touch on one or two skills for each one. Suffice it to say that there's a lot more there. But if we overload you, you'll go and none of it'll stick. So be okay with just picking up a little bit here. So as you remember, the mindful eating cycle is a series of questions that brings us into the present moment that helps us make decisions. Now, it might have seemed like a bunch of different questions, but I first really want to point out to you that it is a logical order. They're in this order because this is really the order that we make decisions in. The why am I eating, is sort of going on behind the scenes at all times. Oftentimes, we are not aware of why we're eating. Very often, we have no awareness that we have this emotional thing going on, or we have a habit, or oftentimes there's multiple triggers going on. So why I eat drives the cycle, and if we have no awareness, we might get stuck in cycles that aren't working very well for us, and we don't know why we keep doing the same thing over and over again. So when I eat is really the awareness point for most people. They're not aware that they have these emotional triggers or these schedules or other things that are triggering them, but that when do I eat piece is suddenly the awareness. And so that's the place that we often will find people first begin to learn how to tell the difference between physical hunger and all the other reasons we eat. So then after that, after I decide that I'm going to eat, I get to make a decision about what I'm going to eat, right? So first I want to eat, then I decide what to eat. After what do I eat, I have it in front of me, now I decide how I'm going to eat it. As I'm eating it, I decide when I'm going to stop, so how much of it am I going to eat? And then after I'm all done eating, where does that energy go? Does that make sense? So it's not just a random series of questions. They go in order for a very specific reason. The chapters of your book, if you have the book, go in this order. All of our workshops go in this order. And oftentimes what I find is that people, as they're learning this process, and it is a process, you're not going to walk away from here and suddenly everything just clicks and that's the end of it all. It is a process of learning. But oftentimes they learn in this kind of order as well. All right, so we're going to start with why do I eat? And I want to go back to this idea that we have these underlying triggers. So think about that word trigger for a moment. Think for yourself, what are some of your triggers that you're currently aware of, and understand that there's probably triggers that you don't even realize that you have, and there are probably triggers that sometimes are really prominent. We're getting into holiday season. Anybody got any holiday triggers, right? And then, of course, we have all these other things that are going on. So suffice it to say that our environment is loaded with triggers for overeating, especially if that's been your pattern and you've associated a lot of these different things. So think about that. I mentioned Pavlov, right? So Pavlov rings the bell and the dogs salivate, rings the bell, dogs salivate, and after a period of time, he doesn't even need to feed the dogs to get them to salivate. Just the ringing of the bell will cause that. So many of us have a lot of bells. We have a lot of bells. So a trigger is anything that stimulates a reaction. A trigger is anything that stimulates a reaction. The reason I'm making a point of this is because a trigger has no power in and of itself. That switch cannot flip itself. We flip it. Do you understand? We're the ones that get to decide whether I'm going to flip it or not. So mindfulness is really just about being aware that the trigger exists and then consciously deciding, flip it or not flip it, okay? So this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to say, and I only say that because this single concept changed my life, not just in food, but in the way that I do a lot of things. And I would summarize it as TFAR, T-F-A-R, TFAR. You've actually heard little bits of this as I've sat in on as many of the lectures as I could. I heard little hints of this because other people are aware that these invisible thoughts drive us. So think about this. What you think drives how you feel, which ultimately helps determine what you do, which ultimately gives you your results, right? You've heard some version of this. What you think causes what you feel, causes how you act, and ultimately what your results are. So think about this. Let's not talk about food for a minute. Let's talk about exercise. If your thought is, I don't have enough time to exercise. Does anybody have that thought? Yeah? I don't have enough time to exercise. So how do you feel about thinking that? Anybody? Stressed, guilty, overwhelmed, right? It's unfair. If I could, I would. We sort of feel disempowered when we have this thought, I don't have time to exercise, especially when, as I do, when you know and you believe that it's important, but you don't have time. That's a very disempowering thought. So there's your feeling. So what are your actions when you're thinking you don't have time to exercise, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling disempowered, you're feeling guilty, you're feeling stressed about it? You don't exercise, of course you don't. You don't exercise. In fact, not only do you not exercise, but you might walk past the stairwell and stand in front of the elevator. True? We're so conditioned to believe that we don't have time for exercise that we miss the opportunities to move our bodies because somehow that's not exercise, right? So interestingly, because we believe we don't have time for exercise, we don't do it, and then of course we feel more tired, we feel less energetic, maybe our weight changes, maybe we feel more guilty, more stressed, maybe we eat a little bit more because of that. And ultimately, what happens in this particular cycle is that we repeat the pattern over and over and over again until it becomes a belief, a self-fulfilling prophecy. We repeat it so many times that we don't even have to think the thought anymore. It's just a belief system. And it drives these habits that become automatic or mindless. No, exercise was the example, but think to yourself about all of the things that you do in your life, not just with eating and exercise, but all of the things that you do merely out of habits that are unexamined thoughts and beliefs. Unexamined thoughts and beliefs. We just hold them to be true and we don't question them. The challenge with this is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever I think actually begins to manifest itself in my life. This is not something woo-woo. This is fact. Our brains are just organs, just like our heart and our lungs, and our job of our brain is to think. And our brain does not independently think. We tell it what to think. That's kind of a weird thought. But in truth, we get to direct our brain. It's like putting in an address on your GPS system. You get to put in your address. If your address is, I don't have time to exercise, then the brain goes, okay, that's where I'm going. No exercise for me because I don't have time. Does this make sense to you? Yeah. And it's not just food, right? It's relationships, it's work, it's a lot of different things in our lives. So this pause that I introduced to you earlier today is about giving ourselves the ability to choose our responses. We're going to choose our responses. Now that doesn't mean that I'm going to walk into a movie theater and think popcorn and then say, okay, I'm aware that I'm in a movie theater and I want popcorn, I'm not going to do it. That's not the point. I can still choose the popcorn if I want. There's no real big problem with choosing popcorn. It's just that I'm choosing it, I'm not defaulting to it. It's living on default or on reaction that causes us to live out the past over and over and over again. So of course we get the same results. We're doing the same thing that we did before. All right, so let's move on to the when decision point. So going back to this idea that for many of us, we're not aware of what's driving our eating cycle. So we're going to learn one very simple thing, and in fact, this is one of the key messages of our second workshop. It's in your second chapter. This key message is deceptively simple. But really, what we're going to learn how to do is whenever I feel like eating, I learn to pause and ask a question. Am I actually hungry? Okay, so repeat it back to me. Whenever I feel like eating, I'm going to pause and ask, am I hungry? Now, I know some of you drove here from nearby states or cities. So you get on the highway and you're driving along and suddenly you see a gas station sign and you think to yourself, I wonder if I should get some gas. What do you do next? You look at your fuel gauge. You don't just pull off at every gas station you see? No? That would be silly, wouldn't it? Yet, how often do we see food and think, oh, that looks good, and start automatically putting it into our mouths? So pausing to ask the question, am I hungry, is simply about pausing to check my fuel gauge. Do I need this food, or do I just want this food? How do you know you're hungry? What are the symptoms that you get when you're hungry? Okay. Okay. So tired, stomach growling, maybe headache if you're really hungry, irritable, difficulty concentrating, distracted, making mistakes. Sometimes we'll postpone eating, too busy, can't eat, gotta keep going, and the longer we postpone it, the less productive, the more mistakes, the more irritable, things just kind of start to derail. No wonder by the time we finally eat, we're... Yeah. So here's the thing to keep in mind. Hunger is a physical set of symptoms. Hunger is a physical set of symptoms. It is not a thought. It is not a craving. It is not, ooh, I better eat now in case I don't get to eat later. It's not, ooh, I better get my share before so-and-so gets into the break room. It's a physical set of symptoms. Now the caveat, and this is not fully just about bariatric surgery, but the caveat is that for those who have a gastric band or a sleeve procedure, oftentimes hunger is not present for 6 to 12 months or so after surgery, the honeymoon period. So it doesn't work very well to try to use hunger to guide our eating in that early postoperative phase. If it were up to me, people would learn this skill before they have their surgery. People who have a band procedure can very much need this skill early on. Okay? So, don't ask, am I hungry, to decide whether you're allowed to eat. Ask, am I hungry, to figure out why I want to. Don't ask the question to decide if you're allowed to eat, but ask the question to figure out why I want to. So sometimes people who have a history of dieting, as I did, will take this concept and turn it back into a diet. If I'm not hungry, I'm not allowed to eat. Now, what would happen if you made that little rule for yourself? You'd end up right back in a restrictive eating cycle, wouldn't you? You'd do fine, you'd do really well, and you'd think, this is really cool. I get to eat whenever I'm hungry. This is really cool. And then 2, 3 weeks, 2, 3 months, 2, 3 hours into it, you'd suddenly think, oh, I want to eat, but I'm not hungry. I can't eat. I shouldn't eat. It would be bad to eat. And there we are, back in the same place we were before, where we're not in charge of the decisions, but some lady at OAC told me this, and now now I can't do it. I can't do that either. So asking the question, am I hungry, is just about checking your fuel gauge. If you want to get off the freeway and fill up, go ahead. Go ahead. But do it consciously. In my old yo-yo dieting days, what I would do is I would feel like eating chocolate. Perhaps that's always been my big thing. I love chocolate. So I would want to eat chocolate, and I would say, no, I can't. I don't have enough points left, or I don't have enough exchange, or I don't have enough optional calories, or whatever. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah? Okay. So I would get into this mindset, and I would start rationalizing, and I'd start eating carrots and, doing all of these other things that really had nothing to do with the fact that the real reason that I wanted the chocolate was I wanted pleasure. Carrot sticks don't do it for me. Please, if you want potato chips, have carrot sticks. Really? Like, on what planet does that work? So some of you do Twitter, I know, because I've seen you tweeting in the talks, which is great. So I'm at Eat What You Love. And sometimes I like to tweet sort of goofy things. So I tweeted out, how many rice cakes does it take to satisfy a craving for chocolate? Somebody actually responded. She said, 7. ... and a Snickers bar. Exactly. So if you are not hungry and you want to eat for pleasure, if you make a conscious decision, I am eating this for pleasure, then eat it in a way that actually gives you pleasure. You don't get pleasure when you hide in a closet and shovel down half a bag of Hershey's Kisses. Not that I've ever done that. That's not pleasurable. What gives us pleasure from eating is tasting, experiencing, smelling, enjoying, and then being done with that. Because when you're not hungry, a half a bag of Hershey's Kisses is not going to give you more pleasure than 2 or 3. In fact, for most of us, there is a very serious changeover point at which whatever pleasure, whether you were hungry or not, begins to shift into discomfort, regret, right? Just use the question to start to gain awareness of what's going on for you. That's really the only purpose of the question. All right, so let's talk for a minute about what to eat, because I feel very conscious that I've spoken now for 20 minutes here and 40 minutes this morning. We really haven't talked about what to eat. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, because that's the hard part, right? Okay, so everybody stand up. If you can and you're comfortable doing that, just go ahead and stand up for a minute. If you're not comfortable doing that, just stay where you are. But if you could, just get yourself up out of your seat for a second. Now, everybody, touch your head, cross your arms across your chest, and then open your arms out wide. Let's do it again. Touch your head, arms across your chest, arms out wide. A little faster. Again. One more time. Great. So that was the exercise portion of my talk. All right, so what does this mean? So I am a very big proponent. Don't sit down yet. I'm a very big proponent of eating what you love. I am a very big proponent, and I know that for many of us who've struggled with food, I know that's a very scary thought. I get that. I totally get that. And I think sometimes people will say, yeah, that sounds fine, except I have diabetes, or I've had bariatric surgery. I can't eat whatever I want, or I have binge eating disorder, or whatever. I totally get that. I would say to you that it is even more important to eat what you love. If you've had bariatric surgery and you have a small capacity to eat food, it's super important that you're conscious about what you're eating and that you're choosing foods that give you a sense of enjoyment and satiety. Satiety doesn't just come from the volume of food or the calories that you eat, but satiety is also very much an emotional experience. Would you agree? Yes. You can eat a lot of food and not feel satiated at all. So the approach that we use is we teach these questions. So everybody, touch your head. What do I want? Everybody repeat back. What do I want? What do I want to eat? What would taste good? Let's do the next question, and then we'll deconstruct these. What do I need? What does my body need? Okay? And then the last question, what do you think it is? What do I have? Somebody said everything. No, it's not that. What do I have? What's available to me in this time? So let's do it together. What do I? What do I? What do I? Let's do it again. Perfect. Okay, you can sit down if you want. If you don't want, you want to do a little neat, you can stand at the back of the room. All right, so we do facilitator training, and I once had a physician who was a nun, and she did our training program, and she went back to teach these workshops in her community, and she called me and she said, it's the funniest thing. I walk into church and I get confused when I go to, what am I? Yeah. Exactly. So this is kinesthetic learning. How am I going to remember this? So whenever you are hungry and you're deciding what to eat, I think going through a series of questions is very helpful to get you grounded so that you're not just buying what they're selling, you're not eating what's on the list, you're not eating whatever's in front of you, that it's really a conscious choice. The first question being, what do I want? What am I hungry for? What would taste good to me? What have I been craving? What have I been thinking about? So is it true that sometimes we have cravings for specific foods? Yeah. And what happens when you try to eat different foods instead?
You still have the craving. You just end up eating the first thing plus what you really want.
Exactly. And by the time you get to it, you're not hungry anymore, so you feel stuffed and miserable. Or you think, well, I've already blown it, now I might as well. And it just starts this downward spiral. So asking the question, what do I want, is super important. Now, I'm going to add a little caveat, and again, it's hard for me to just kind of stick to one thing because there's so much I want to tell you and share with you. But I think there's a little caveat here, and I think it's, what do I really, 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 really want? Because sometimes we really, 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 really want ice cream. And sometimes we just want something that's cold and creamy and sweet, and yogurt would do. Do you know what I mean? So if you can start to distinguish between the wants and the really, 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 really wants, that will help you sort of break away from always eating the ice cream whenever it pops in your mind, or the never eating ice cream until you binge on ice cream. Does that make sense? But that follow-up question, what do I? So important. So what kinds of things are we going to think about when we're considering what our body needs? Nutrients. Protein, great. Activity, what have I been doing? What am I going to be doing? Great. What have I already eaten today? What am I going to eat? Are we going out to dinner for a big meal or certain kinds of foods? Great. What else? Love. What does that mean? I mean, I know what love means. Do you mean like what am I, huh? Okay, thank you for bringing that up. So I want to clarify that we're asking this question once we've already decided that we're going to eat food. I kind of differentiate that because if I ask the question, am I hungry, and the answer is no, and I decide to eat anyway, then I need to really focus on this question in terms of, let me back up a little bit. The game I used to play when I was dieting is I really, really want to eat because I need love or stress relief or I'm bored or whatever. And so I would eat a whole lot of foods that were allowed on the diet. No, it doesn't work very well, do you think? Doesn't work at all. And so what I was doing was still eating or overeating or binging on foods just because they were allowed, but I wasn't meeting my need for love and I wasn't meeting my need for pleasure, so it was just really a waste of time. It wasn't getting anywhere with it. Does that make sense? So let's assume for this question, just to keep it simple, because again, we only have a limited time, let's assume that you're actually hungry. You might still want something that reminds you of home or comfort or whatever, but that takes place in the what do I want part. So what other questions besides nutrition, protein, what have I eaten? Anything else? Okay. Satisfaction, what else? Right, do I need a little bit of food? Do I need a lot of food? How hungry am I? What else am I going to be doing? And again, this is a subtlety, but if you're only a little bit hungry, how much food do you need? Only a little bit. So sometimes people will get hungry and then they'll have an entire meal when they're not really that hungry. They just only have a little bit that they need. Or, well, I don't want to go down that. There's another rabbit hole there. We'll stay away from that. Okay, so what do I need? Other things, allergies, food intolerances. For those of you who've had surgery, you already know that there are some foods that don't do well for you, that you eat and the consequences just aren't worth it. So asking the question, what do I need, is really about saying, how can I best care for myself so that I feel my best, I have energy. Yes, I might really, really, really want this particular food, but I know when I eat it, I feel miserable afterward. And for me, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it to feel like that. That's very different from somebody on your bariatric team saying, you can't eat, fill in the blank. It's about you making the decision for yourself because you want to feel good. Do you get that subtle difference? That's totally the difference between being in control and being in charge. That's really what this boils down to. It's about you deciding for yourself. All right, so one more time, everybody. What do I want? Excellent. You can start using this tonight, and you'll find that it will help you. Okay, let's talk about how we eat. All right, now, how we eat is really about loving what we eat. How many of you would say that you love food? Just a show of hands, just so okay, good. Pretty high percentage, okay. How many of you would say that you eat as if you loved to eat? How many of us eat as if we can't wait to get it over with? So there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. We say, oh, I love food, and then we eat it like this, or we eat it while we're distracted, or we eat it fast, or we eat so much that we're miserable afterward. And I'm not sure that's really love. If you take it out of context and you think maybe about your partner or your children, if you love your children and you sit down with your back to them and do on the computer, yeah, you know, not paying attention to them, is that really showing them love? Yet that's what we do with food oftentimes, is we're eating while we're doing something else. So loving what you eat is really about two things in my mind. So we call it mindful eating, and oftentimes, now that this is on your radar, if it wasn't already, you will see things on the internet written by a lot of different people. This is really bubbling to the surface now. It's really catching hold. It resonates for people. They get it. Thank goodness, because I've been talking about it for 15 years, and now finally people are like, yeah, that mindful eating thing, I've heard of that. So mindful eating, sometimes on the internet, they make it all about just savoring food. That's a really important piece of it, but it's not the only piece. So I don't want you to forget about whether you're hungry and choosing food without restriction and some of the other things we've talked about. To me, mindful eating is eating with intention and attention. So everybody say that with me. Eating with intention and attention. So eating with intention and attention. So intention, what does intention mean? Purpose, right? It's purpose. It's having a purpose. Am I eating this because I'm hungry, because I need nutrition, because everybody else is eating? What's really going on? What is my purpose? If I don't have a purpose, then I just kind of go into my old autopilot behavior. True? Eating with attention is about full awareness to the experience, totally connecting with what's happening. So we have chocolate for you, and we're gonna do a mindful eating practice. And I just wanna give a little caveat to this. If you don't like chocolate, or for whatever reason you choose not to eat chocolate, don't. This is totally up to you. If you want a little snack and you want to experience mindful eating, you have something else with you that you prefer, great. If you just decide you don't want to do it and you want to sit and listen and try it later, that's fine too. And I also want you to pause for just a moment and check in with your brain. What happened when I said, we're going to have some chocolate to taste? Where is it now? Shut up talking, lady, and bring it out, right? What else? What other things came to mind? Yummy.
If you make good chocolate.
If it's good chocolate, and it is, I tested it myself. No, it's not sugar-free. Is this a trick? Okay, right? Because people do stuff like that to you, right? No, this is not a trick. It is not a trick, I promise. I have dark chocolate and milk chocolate. You can choose. Okay, now pay attention. What did your brain do? Okay, did any of you start thinking, okay, I should have the dark chocolate because that's, okay, anybody do that?
No, I was like, oh, milk, yeah.
Okay, all right, so that's what I'm going to suggest to you is that just pay attention to what do I want. So dark chocolate might be a healthier choice, and I'm a big dark chocolate fan, but I want you to really pay attention. What do I want and what do I need? And I want you to choose what you really, 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 really want, the 4 really test. If you want milk chocolate, eat it and don't feel guilty about it. So I have some assistants here. Now they're bringing it around. Let me give you the lowdown so that we can move pretty fast. There's some mindful eating tip cards that you can keep for your wallet. The chocolates that have, is it silver that's showing? The silver ones are dark and the red ones are milk, the silver thing that's showing on the top, okay? So we're gonna pass that, take one. Now here's the other bit of instructions. Once you get your chocolate, wait. If I forget to say that, about half the people, a third of the people, don't have any chocolate for the experience. Which is really funny. It just reminds us that when we have food in front of us, the automatic response is to consume it. Have you noticed this? I was, again, one of the people that was in my training program, he's a physician. He actually happens to work for a large health insurance company. And we did this class, and he called me later and he said, I got to tell you the story. It was around October. He said, I walked into one of my colleagues' offices, and I noticed that he had Reese's peanut butter cups on his desk. And I love Reese's peanut butter cups. And you had said, eat what you really love, and what do I want? And I saw those, and for the first time ever, I gave myself permission to have them. So I said to my colleague, may I have some of your Reese's peanut butter cups? Because, yeah, that's what it's there for. He said, so I took a few, and we finished our discussion, and I got back to my office to eat my peanut butter cups, and I stuck my hand in my pocket. Wrappers.
Oh, you don't remember eating?
He did not remember eating them. He had consumed them sometime between taking them, mindfully deciding to have them, and getting back to his office, he had eaten them. Have you done this? Have you done this where you've eaten something and thought, oh, if I just had one more bite, because we didn't pay attention to the other 32 bites we took? Just mindless. So what we're going to do now is a mindful eating experience. Does everybody have chocolate that wants chocolate? No. Oh, my goodness. Well, we'll... Yes, absolutely. If you prefer to eat something else, but wait till we do that. But absolutely, you may do whatever you wish. Okay, there's, yeah, some people up here. All right, so first, while we're waiting for the chocolate to get to you, what is your intention? Raise your hand if you don't have chocolate yet and you want it. Okay, so what is your intention for eating this food? Remember the intention part. What is the okay. Okay, so she's going to have a little jerky because she feels like salt. Some of us we're doing it because of the exercise. We're going to practice eating, so we're going to learn. So if that's your intention to learn, then be patient with me slowing down the process a little bit so you can learn as much as possible out of it. Anything else? Any other intentions? You're hungry, okay? Anybody just like chocolate? All right, great. All right, so first, let's take a moment to have a little feast for the eyes. And I just want you to look at your chocolate. Notice what kind it is. Maybe this is an unfamiliar brand to you. Maybe just a little bit of curiosity. And before we get to the eating part, I'd like you to take a moment and just express a little gratitude for the food that you have in front of you. This doesn't have to be some religious thing. But I think oftentimes we forget about the amazing fact that we even have food so abundantly. We've gotten into such a love-hate relationship that we forget that we're so blessed to have these delicious things to eat and nutritious things to eat. And I think the thing that's amazing about food now that it's my friend and not my enemy anymore is that I love the fact that it is the perfect circle of energy. Because you think about this. Somebody far away grew cocoa beans, manufactured this chocolate, packaged it up, shipped it here. I happen to know that this wasn't produced here in the United States. Shipped it here. Somebody sold it. Somebody shipped it here. Some people handled it. We had people helping us deliver this chocolate. So in some way, shape, or form, this chocolate has the energy of the sun and the soil and all these other people, and all of those people all along that chain made a little bit of money out of this. When you consume it and you get pleasure and enjoyment and fuel out of it, and then you in turn use your fuel to do your work, whatever your work and whatever your passion is, you in turn are using that energy to do your stuff in the world, and you might even get money back for that. And then you might spend money to come to a conference like this where we buy chocolate and then, or in this case, it was donated for you. And so isn't that an amazing circle? It's an amazing circle. So food is an amazing connector. If we can start to love and respect food more instead of making it our enemy, I think that some of our issues around food will start to get better. Like, okay, can you stop talking already, please, lady? All right, let's go ahead and open the chocolate, and I want you to eat with your ears now. Just notice that kind of little crisp snapping of the opening of it. What else did you notice when you opened it? The aromas. So I want to talk for a moment about aroma. Do you remember in grade school we learned about our 5 senses and we learned about our tongue? Do you remember what you learned about your tongue? What does your tongue taste? Okay, so sweet, salty, bitter, sour. And does anybody know the 5th one? They came up with it after I was out of grade school. Umami. Okay, so I told you earlier this morning my husband's a professional chef. So umami is an identified sensor on our tongue. It is a Japanese word that roughly means savory or deliciousness. It comes from the compound glutamate, which is often in fish sauce, soy sauce, red meat, mushrooms, red wine, dark chocolate, lots of other foods. So whenever you taste something that just has this deliciousness to it, oftentimes there is some umami component to it, okay? Here's why this is important. Everything else you taste or think you taste is not taste. It's actually flavor, and it's coming from the combination of the taste and the aromas. So when you put a big bite of food in your mouth and you can't breathe anymore or get food in, or get air into the back of your nose, you're missing half the experience. So that's one of the reasons to take small bites. And if we don't take the time to smell our food, if we're just kind of doing the mechanical thing, then we're going to miss a lot of the experience. So right now, make a decision. Do I want to have part of this bite of chocolate? Do I want to pop the whole thing? And do I want half? Just, it doesn't, there's no right answer, just decide. And then as you bring it up to your mouth, take another moment to smell it. And then put it into your mouth and allow it to sit on your tongue for a minute. A moment. Not a minute, but a moment. Now, this is where you have to show up to the party. Show up to the party. Oftentimes, this is where we check out. So often, this is where we start unwrapping the next piece of chocolate, or loading the next forkful, or turning back to reading whatever we were reading. True? This is the good stuff. This is what you were looking forward to. This is what you were excited about. Don't check out now. This is the important part. Noticing on your tongue as it starts to warm up, breathe, get in the aromas. Notice liking or disliking. Do you like it? Do you like it? Yeah, okay. Notice how it tastes. Notice the textures. Notice how it changes. This is what chocolate is for. This is what chocolate is for. And when we eat it like this, we're not getting the true purpose of it. I'll give you a moment to just have another bite. Good? Awesome. Awesome. Yes? Please.
The inside cover has a little quote. Mine says, "Taste is the soul's smile."
Oh, taste is the soul's smile. So I didn't realize that the paper had something inside. Dove does that too, right? So maybe you take that and you take it home with you to remind you about mindful eating. If our habit is to mindlessly eat, it's going to take some practice to get in the habit of doing this. At our retreats, we give a little gold plastic fork to just put in front of your plate. Whatever you can do to remind you of these habits. Yes?
Mine says, there is nothing in our intelligence that has not passed by the senses.
There is nothing in our intelligence that has not passed by our senses. I would beg to differ. We've had lots of, well, actually, you know, it's true, because it's not in our intelligence if we didn't actually experience it. This is why we overeat. This brings me to my next point. The reason we overeat oftentimes is because we weren't aware of the experience. It wasn't in our intelligence because we weren't aware that it even happened. It was so mindless and automatic, we didn't connect with it.
So just now I thought of it. I mean, my intelligence was sitting there.
Yeah.
What does this taste like? What does this smell like?
So how many of you are more satisfied by this one single bite of chocolate than you usually are by...
That's what I was just going to say. I took the piece was a little bit bigger than that.
And you have jerky, right? Not even chocolate. It works for everything, by the way.
I'm a salt fanatic. Normally I would have just went, whoop.
Gone.
I wouldn't have really tasted the salt, which I wanted.
Yes.
That little piece satisfied me, but normally I would have just shoved it in my mouth. I'm putting it back in the bag because I'm happy now.
And here's the nice thing. When you put it back in the bag, you get to enjoy it again later when you really want it. It's amazing. I'm sorry. I'm like a fanatic about this because it's so amazing. It feels good. So, well, let's wait until we get through this because I know some people have to leave, and then but I'll hang out because I want to hear that. So, eating the right amount of food is not about being good. It's about feeling good. Eating the right amount of food is not about being good. It's about feeling good. It doesn't feel good to overeat. Whether you've had surgery or not, it does not feel good to way overeat. And so the more mindful you become of your body's signals, the more your body will let you know when enough is enough. So we kind of use this analogy of a balloon. And if you think about it, you think of your stomach as being this balloon that gradually expands as you eat. And at some point, you could, if you haven't had surgery, you could blow that balloon up really full. But what would it be pressing on? Your lungs, right? Anybody felt short of breath or had heartburn? Your belt buckle, right? So eating the right amount of food is not about being good, it's about feeling good. So satiety, satisfaction, contentment is your body's signal that you've had enough. Discomfort means you're not listening. Now, one of the reasons that bariatric surgery works is because it lowers that satiety point, right? We get that physical satisfaction or fullness much sooner if you're paying attention to it. But it's very easy to overeat this. It's also easy to eat slider foods or liquid foods and not get this satiety because we're not getting that sense that we've really had something to eat. It's just kind of going through. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. All right, so last, where do I invest the energy? So this is our cultural image of what exercise is supposed to do for you. True? You know, it drives me crazy because very, very, very few people will look like this, even with massive amounts of exercise. In fact, I'm pretty sure that she doesn't even really look like this. What do you think? Exactly. So, and just because this is an equal opportunity, this is what you guys are supposed to look like. Is this what exercise really does for us? Not most of us. Youth and genes and Photoshop, right? So ultimately, I really feel that the purpose of eating is to live a full, vibrant life. That life you've always craved. That's what your fuel does for you. If you make your life all about the fuel and not about the life, then something is wrong here. Something is wrong here. In one of the workshops, when I was still teaching the workshops myself, one of the workshops I did was at a senior area. They were retirement community. And they were 60, 70, 80 years old. About the third workshop, this lady slammed her hand down and she said, "Why did nobody teach me this 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago?" So if there is some part of you that thinks, I'll just do this for a little while longer, someday I'll get this, or I'll just try another diet or another this, no. At some point, you have to decide that you're not going to do it that way anymore. At some point, you have to decide that you are getting on with your life. And here's the kicker. The more you live your life, the more you fill the holes in your life, whether it's love or pleasure or comfort or celebration or other things that you need, the more you live your life, the less food needs to fill those holes for you. That's why it's a cycle. Because where you invest your energy is the whole point, and the more you invest your energy in taking good care of yourself, the more the food doesn't have to do that, and the more you can enjoy food without overeating the food. So if I can wrap with one last story. My husband, the professional chef, he gave me this little gift. So I open it up. He's not a big gift giver. So I open it up. I'm kind of anticipating this. And I pull out a bag of malted milk balls. I said, "Gosh, sweetie," that's what I say when I'm like, "Sweetie, you've heard me talk about this before. I'm really surprised that you would think that this would be a good gift. You know how I've had trouble with this before." And he goes, "Well, I kind of thought you'd be over it by now." Oh, right. So I opened up the malted milk balls and I took one out and I took a bite. I didn't even pop the whole thing. I took a bite and I was like, "Oh my gosh, these are just like when I was in my residency." He goes, "Yeah, I know. You can get them down at Whole Foods." I'm like, "Oh, man." Really? So I ate the rest of it. And then I had another one. It was so good. So I had another one. I thought, this is weird. That was not that good. It wasn't even close to the first two. I wonder how many malted milk balls I ate in my residency that I never even tasted or enjoyed. So I passed them around, shared them. They got back to me. There's still a bunch left, so I put the little twist tie back on it, and I stuck it in the cabinet, and I'm no dummy. I put it behind food. We learned some tricks during the process, right? And I knew. So I put it behind, and do you know that I actually forgot about the malted milk balls?
Wow. So you are over it.
So one day, about a week or two later, I work from home now, and so I'm working at my computer, and all of a sudden I thought, oh, I want chocolate. So what did I ask myself first? Am I hungry? Am I hungry? I actually didn't, because I didn't care. I just really, 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 really wanted the chocolate. So I walk out to the kitchen, and the whole way, I'm on the way, I'm thinking to myself, if somebody ate those malted milk balls, somebody's gonna die, right? They were still there. So I got them out, and I had one. It was wonderful. So I had another one. Then I twisted the thing. That was enough. I knew that that third one wasn't going to be great. And I walked back to my office, and I thought, you know what? That was the best gift he could have ever given me. The awareness that I can have malted milk balls, but they don't have me. And that's what I want for you. Thank you.